very, very excited with this specific session between Bejivaca and the Escola de Séries, the School of Series. Um, it's always good to introduce people that are amazing and that you work together with and that you admire. And both, it's all in both companies we're working together, both with Juvi and Bejivaca. I've known Rob at this point for almost 4 years, I believe. I remember the first time we met, it was at a dinner where we were celebrating starting to work together on the adaptation of Nelson Rodrigues to the screen and to Broadway slash theater to do Asphalt Kiss, ou Beijo no Asfalto in Portuguese. And I remember how the first impression that Rob made in me was just like, like he has this amazing body of work, this amazing trajectory that he's going to be sharing with you guys, but very mellow, very humble, very pragmatic, but also always very positive and very constructive, which is a great balance between us because I'm very cynical and Rob is very positive. But when he's cynical, he's much more cynical than I am because that's how life is. And I think that it's been a joy and a learning experience. I became a better producer by working with Rob, and we're going to be doing many more things than this. But I think that it's great, and I think that the whole purpose, Rob, of these sessions that Bijivaca is doing here in LA is to talk to trailblazers like yourself and other people that they interviewed about your trajectory, your past, your present, your future, but also like what are the things that the Brazilian audiovisual industry should bring from Hollywood, but also not copy from Hollywood, right? Because I think that sometimes there is this brilliant marketing, publicity thing that Hollywood does to say it's perfect, but it's not. There's a lot of problems, and I feel that many markets sometimes ended copying Hollywood the wrong way. So, without much further ado, I'm gonna pass the mic to you guys, and yeah, and I hope you guys have a great session, and everybody watching this can learn new things and see all the other amazing things that Juvi is cooking on the film side.
Awesome. Thank you, Mauricio.
All right, thank you, Mauricio. Thanks for the intro. And let me start by thanking you, Rob, for taking the time to talk to us. It's a real honor to meet you and to be able to to learn from you. And I'm going to start by asking you to introduce yourself a little bit to the Brazilian audience and tell us a bit about your work.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to meet you all. And uh, it's been a joy working with Mauricio and Katie uh, on getting these projects to screen. Everyone knows what a heavy lift it can be, but the goal is to have fun on the journey, and that's how we've been collaborating. So that's exciting. Um, as you all may know, I'm a senior vice president of film and theatrical motion pictures at Juvi Productions, which is the company that is owned and operated by Viola Julius and her husband Julius Tenen. And I've been with the company now for roughly 6 years. We have a first look deal at Amazon Studios where we supply them with content. We have 5 films set up over there right now. So daily activities include driving those home and getting Amazon to both finance and distribute them. I've been in the industry now for roughly 3 decades. Started out working with comedian Eddie Murphy. Um, Went on to work with a company called Carsey Warner, and at the time we were doing The Cosby Show, Roseanne, and A Different World. Did that for a couple of years, and then went to work with Paramount in television physical production, overseeing shows like Star Trek, Frasier, Sister Sister, and several others. Um, that experience in physical production gave me the bug to be on the creative side. And so I joined Amblin Films, Steven Spielberg's company, as a script editor. I did that for a few years, where I worked on films like Amistad, Ants, Deep Impact. And after that, doing that for a few years, I went on to develop for director Michael Mann, where we worked on the movies Ali and The Aviator. And after a while doing that, I went independent, where I produced a few series and films on the smaller side. And then that took me back into the studio system, where I worked at Disney, overseeing some TV shows. One included How to Get Away with Murder. And that led me to work with Viola and Julius.
Holy crap! That's like that's an amazing resume. Like, I have so many questions about everything that you've been on, but talking a bit about working with Mauricio and working with Brazilian sensibility. What do you think? What do you think we can learn from you, and what do you think you have learned from the way Mauricio works and the way you think Brazilian productions are run? Like, have you been able to maybe get a glimpse of how things work in Brazil by working with Mauricio, or not?
Well, I haven't got a really good sense of the Brazilian market yet, because the projects that we've been focused on have been primarily uh, building within the Hollywood system. What I would offer, because now that we are starting to get good traction here, um, as Mauricio may have stated, he and Julius had a conversation that we're shifting to focus on the Brazilian market and what possibilities are there and how we can maybe bridge the two. One of the things I would offer, because I think the industry is constantly going through metamorphosis, and uh, the world is a big place, and there are plenty markets that sometimes Hollywood doesn't explore as intensive as it should, in my view. And just from the outside looking in, I believe that the Brazilian market has so many more layers than Hollywood has historically explored. I think that really uh, putting focus there and using the analytical tools to determine where the content is resonating around the world can build a new economy around the content that's being invested in. And so it's one of the things that I like to explore as we continue to work with Mauricio and Katie on what content can both play well in the U.S. market, but also internationally. Is that helpful? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And we've been watching the release of The Woman King, like a film that I've been dying to see. That it's very much up our alley. With Octavio and I, we have like a very we've been very excited to watch this, and we've watched, as you've made a big push to release this film in the Brazilian market. What has been your what has been what has the reception been like, and what are your expectations for the future for new projects like this?
Well, there's that saying that you go where you're treated best. And the Brazilian market, How to Get Away with Murder, and some of the content that Viola has appeared in tends to really resonate with the marketplace. And so part of our process was also looking around the world and gathering analytics on where Viola related content is treated best, where it resonates. And Brazil is one of those marketplaces. And so we intentionally communicated to the studio that we wanted to specifically focus on Brazil and build that out. So that was very intentional.
And I think the reception has been great from what I've seen, the box office numbers and the media coverage of the release of the film.
Yeah.
And do you plan to to have any? Do you plan to do add any other projects to release this way, like focusing on the Brazilian market?
We actually intend on focusing on the Brazilian market for all of our content. So it's part of our strategy. And within that, of course, is beginning to explore what homegrown content that Juvie can help and align with. And that's part of the process with Mauricio and Katie.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, what would you expect from Brazilian companies that are looking to expand and to partner with Hollywood companies and maybe produce something together to release internationally? Because something we've been seeing here when in this little tour that we're doing is that you guys have a very you're very business minded when we're talking about projects and you're talking about brands and what you're communicating to the public. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of companies or what kind of projects are you looking for to releasing in Brazil, and what kind of brand are you trying to establish, and how would that help selling your content to the Brazilian market?
That's a really great question. One of the philosophies behind our content is that, first of all, you must entertain. Yes. Of course, there's always the documentary genre, which is geared toward primarily informing. We move in both spaces, but in terms of narrative content, we're always looking for anything that can introduce the world to those voices that have not been historically explored. And so, in order, from a Juvie perspective, to make the world a better place, we have to get to know each other better. And one of the ways you can use media really effectively is exploring characters that you can give their own sense of autonomy, and telling stories from their point of view through their eyes and how they see the world. Historically, we've often seen universal content and big tentpole films and things through one lens. And our goal is to identify stories where we can introduce different versions of humanity to the world so that we can all get to know each other better. And in our view, Brazil is just rich with stories that are just waiting to be told. One of the things that in close examination about The Woman King, you'll recognize is for African Americans, it's a bit of an origin story. And so going back to look like how did this all begin is really just the start of the conversation. And ideally, we can use that to not only discuss world events, but to also move the conversation forward. And for Juvie, we would be looking and exploring Brazil for similar type stories.
And it's very much a Brazilian origin story too, because like somewhere around there, like we have the same origin, like the same kind of like backstory that created our countries, right? But yeah, so it's it's we for one are very happy to see this kind of stories in the big screen. And but from what I've learned, you may have like the movie had a really long journey for getting to the screen. And how was it developing? How easy was it, or how hard was it developing and trying to do what you just said, like putting different perspectives and trying to get content that speaks to a different kind of audience than what the studio system is maybe used to maybe catering to.
Yeah. Uh, well, constructing the story was not unlike much of the content that we would do or that you would do, right? So it's really when you're looking to build content with intent so that the audience can really resonate with the characters, but you're also trying to start a conversation. Various people will take away what they resonate with, and whatever their life's perspective or point of view is oftentimes what they're going to relate to. So you it's a matter of finding what you want to say in the content and identifying characters that can help drive that narrative. As you see, one of the characters in The Woman King is also Brazilian, and that was intent because, like you mentioned, the origin stories are similar, and so introducing that as a potential narrative that can continue was intentionally done. And so developing the story was just part of our modus operandi. uh, Selling the story and setting it up, that was more of a heavy lift. Uh, because one of the things that Viola and Julius will often say is that, yes, the goal is, as I mentioned, to intentfully develop entertaining content that can allow characters to breathe and to exist with their own sense of agency. In telling those stories, you only want to work with the best while providing opportunity for new voices, new experiences, and new auteurs along the way. That can sometimes result in a project structure that is completely inclusive. So it doesn't become about having all Black actors, all Black, uh, cinematographers, crew, writers. It becomes a matter of finding the best people to tell those stories, right, while providing opportunity for new developing talent to join that ride. And so one of the things that ends up being, especially in this environment of sort of diversity inclusion, it's really selling the point that we're looking to tell the individual character's story while providing opportunity. And sometimes, in order to do that, you have to package it so that the financier and the distributor can um, uh, can invest in it, right? So it's a matter of if you see, The Woman King was a big sort of event film, and anytime you are doing a project like that, and there's tens of millions of dollars involved, there's big marketing budgets. You have to construct it in a way that it makes sense for the financier. And so part of the heavy lift, I would say, is really just sort of uh, uh, um, establishing that uh, a a project that is diverse and inclusive includes everybody, right? So it looks like the world. And so it was taking a project like The Woman King, right? The story is the story, and it's very rare that someone will go to a TV show series that resonates with them and really care about who's behind the scenes, right? Like no one really knows how Game of Thrones, what the crew, who's directing each episode of this new series. And so, but when you have a film that is a statement piece, oftentimes you'll get audiences going back into, so who's the writer, who's the director, who's the producer, who's telling the story, as opposed to engaging in the story and allowing the characters to resonate. And so part of the heavy lift is actually selling that, look, uh, uh, it's really the story we're focused on, and the politics behind the scene, which ends up being a really an element that uh, that is not always the pleasant part of the
And
process.
you're getting pushback from both sides, right? From
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And then, when you have a vision, Viola and Julius are visionaries, and the way they see this is they want to build content so that it travels universally, and not just it's not, it doesn't help if you make a great film and nobody sees it. And so along the way, there is some compromise that has to be made, and you have to make that if you want to get the content out. And so I would say that building the film was actually a very rewarding experience, because we had a great creative team behind it. Selling it was a bit of a heavy lift, and once we got TriStar and Sony to really invest in it, we were really thrilled by their excitement.
But on a more practical note, like how did you manage to get things done? Like you want to be inclusive, but you're getting pressure from financiers, and so what? How do you do you compromise on which side, and how much, like how do you, because that I'm very interested in that, because that's something that we also face on some level on trying to create new projects, but also bringing like new faces, and even ourselves being new professionals on the market, and trying to get included in projects that we admire and we want to be a part of. And how does one go about trying to appease both sides of the equation, like on a practical level, like what did you have to give up, and what did you when did you have to put your foot down and stuff?
And another great question. Thank you very much. So what I offer, and this comes down to creative integrity, right? I think that what you must determine is, what is it that you want to do or say with your content. If you determine that you are only interested in entertaining, then you must make sure that your content is entertaining. If your content has a message, then you must focus on what that message is and not compromise. So determining what it is what your goal is with your content, I would offer is vitally important, because then you know which areas you can and cannot compromise. Uh, uh, this was in the instance of the Woman King. It's fascinating, because I read a review that the the author of the article thought that the story, the story between Naniska and Naui slowed down the film. I found that to be really an interesting comment, because there is where we built in the humanity of these warriors. And so what it said to me was that the author of that review was not used to seeing Black women having that level of humanity. They only wanted to see them out fighting and and doing the things that they were doing. And so when you compare that to other stories, whether it's 300 or whether it's uh, 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 what was the why is the name slipping me now? The Mel Gibson and
The Patriot, the Apocalypto.
Braveheart.
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 Thank you very
Thank you very much.
Whether
Whether you look at either of those stories, there's always that humanizing moment for them. And so that was very important to Viola, to make sure that these characters were humanized. And that's what I mean in terms of what is it that you want to say with your content.
Right.
and so
For
us,
us,
her,
that was non-negotiable. And in terms of telling these stories, I would offer that, we have to present to oftentimes a lot of people until you land where you're supposed to be. And some artists get discouraged by what they consider a no. And if you track with the idea that you want to go where you're treated best, what we have to do is we have to remember that when someone doesn't resonate with your content, that means you're closer to the person that will. And so the idea is, once you know what it is you want to say, keep going and don't stop until you find someone who sees what you see. And then those elements are protected. So if you say, I want to tell a story about an emotional connection with two warriors, right? Then that is what you can protect. And you agree that you're going to protect that. Now that there within the lifting, the heavy lifting becomes a challenge, because you have a partner now that has your vision, and somewhere along the way you may have to make some compromises, but you have not compromised the integrity of the message that you're trying to send. Is that helpful?
That's super helpful. I was just I was thinking as you were speaking. I was thinking about a project we have, and I was like, oh, that's what we should like. It's super helpful. When you listed your super extensive and impressive resume, you've circled around Hollywood quite a bit. Like, you've been to the huge studios, to smaller but still big, like places like Emblem, and you said you were a bit in the indie market. And I think in Brazil we may be closer to what your experience was in the indie market, maybe at Emblem. And what did you learn, like, going from like smaller projects to huge projects like The Woman King or Amistad? Like, what kind of sensibility did you bring when you went to work for some time in the indie market and then came back, that maybe we could apply to the Brazilian productions, maybe?
I would say that what I learned is that the difference in the indie content and the studio content is really just the numbers, because so if it's a smaller production, you have less people, less money. If it's a bigger production, you have more money and more people. But the construction of the content is similar. So if you have a really good story with really good characters, you can cast that with A-list talent and spend $40 million on it. Or you can get that talent to waive their salary and make it for $2 million. It's the same story. And so what I recognize is that the difference in independent small films and large studio films is really the talent that's involved, whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera, which often drives the budget. And so I think that the best approach in both instances is just finding the best people to do the job at hand. at the budget in which you're working with. Now, of course, distribution um, is always a concern, but in today's marketplace, independently, there are more options than there was, let's say, 10 years ago. And so, um, determining up front whether you want to sell your content, self distribute your content, or align with a larger corporation that has distribution in place, just determining um, how, first of all, I always recommend for filmmakers and talent to get just a general sense of the marketplace, because you always want to identify your audience, right? Identifying the audience and where they are and how you can reach them. For filmmakers, I recommend just doing a crash course in where things are today, kind of getting a sense of who resonates with your content, whether it's a wealthy individual that has the ability to fund it, whether it's a crowdfunding source, or whether it's a large corporation. Identifying your target market and then building it for that. And what I've noticed is that often when you construct quality content, it will find its place.
All right, that really helpful. But it's weird because in Brazil we have like different financing structures. Like it's a mix between government funds and now with streaming services joining, like getting really heavily into the Brazilian market. There's some of that money, and we have like a really huge player that mostly dominates the market in Brazil, and that is global TV. And I'm wondering, like, on a day-to-day basis, how do you format, like you were saying, like between a wealthy individual or like a big corporation or crowdfunding, like what did you like for a project like The Woman King, for example, or whatever you have worked on before, like what did you like what kinds of things did you identify that you know, maybe if I change this I can sell this better, maybe because it sometimes it can change the nature of the project, right? If you're too maybe aware of where the financing comes from and you're trying to appease to whoever is banking the film, because that's something maybe that we face over there. Like there's certain kinds of stories that are more like prone to be told and more prone to be financed by be it the government funds, be it the streaming services, or be it global, and that can maybe shape whatever you're trying to whatever story you're trying to tell. So how do you keep, like, what have you changed in the pitching sessions or meetings that you had, that you say, you know what, I should have said this, or I have this idea, I'm gonna say this, like this is really, I'm really curious about that.
Got it. Thank you. So here in the States, we of course we have tax credits in each state, and that's where government funding is supportive of producing our content. Can you tell me a little bit more about how the government funding works in Brazil?
Sure. So we have it works kind of like grants. So you develop a project, and you develop annually, or maybe like periodically, they have like a grant that they release. Like, oh, we were looking for these kinds of projects, and maybe these are kind of projects from new filmmakers, from established filmmakers, and then they establish like a fixed budget. Like, we have this amount of money to distribute between this amount of projects. So it's different categories too. So you have like development, you have like for production, for post production, and then you develop your project. Like you send a script, or you send your finish your movie that you want to finish, and there's like a panel of people that analyzes whatever you do, and based on what your experience is, and based like it's kind of like they have this fixed criteria that you have to meet, right? And it can be very bureaucratic, but it can be very fair too, but because they're looking to, like, they have a bunch of rules in place to give new artists voices, to give artists from different regions voices too. So but it can also maybe be a little obtuse, like you don't know what really are what they're looking for, if your story is going to resonate with whoever is reading. You don't know who's reading, like you don't know who's the person who's evaluating you, and that can vary wildly. Like we can maybe sometimes we send the same project like twice or thrice, and we get three different responses from, like, and it's the same government body, right? So it's kind of like we're trying to guess and learn from whatever feedback we get at each time we apply for one of these grants, right? So it's what I'm trying to get to is, like, because you over here you can see, like, oh, we have this wealthy individual, and maybe I can do this and that, and we get the feedback that doesn't necessarily is gonna apply to whoever is going to evaluate us next, right? So there's a really weird balancing act between, okay, so they're looking for this. We got this feedback. What can we change about the way we present our project so that it can maybe get made? But then, then, like, sometimes you change your project maybe in ways that you really didn't want to, for maybe nothing, because you're trying to, like, every time appease to a new person. And that's not only government, but even streaming services. Like, you know, each company has, like, their whatever they're looking for. Like, Disney is more family friendly, Netflix whatever, more popular, more pop stuff, and so there's this balancing act between, like, okay, I want to keep my project pure, and I have this idea, and I know what I'm getting at, but to get them, like, to get the money, you have to, like, change, even if it's only the way you present the project, like, and then you do whatever you want with the movie, and shoot whatever you want. I don't know, but you know, it's I mean, I'm wondering, like, what is it like here, like, that you have maybe some, do you have more clarity from, like, into who's giving you maybe the financing, and what you have to do to change it, or is it kind of like us, maybe kind of you're kept in the dark a bit?
Well, I believe that the difference here may be that our state contributions, government contributions, are approached as tax credits. And so they're very rarely, if ever, at all interested in the creative. It's economics. And so it's based upon the spend in each region. So and that's the same approach that many governments take in terms of tax credit incentives to spend and drive the economy locally, is what we depend upon. So we are not in a position where we're open to compromising the intent behind the content just to get the government funding. And so, sort of going back to my earlier comment about finding what it is that you want to say, and then finding the place that resonates with that in particular, and then being open to compromise along the way. To speak specifically to one of your questions, I think that once you determine what it is you want to say and who your market is, I think it's really important to frame how you're presenting the content so that it is accessible to that audience. Right. So if you have a really dark drama that is a human story, there must be something about that story that resonates with you to why you want to tell it. So finding that as opposed to presenting it as a really dark drama, I think is really important. So really finding a way to present your story so that no matter who's seeing it, um, there are emotional moments. There should be emotional moments in every story, right? And those are your universal elements that no matter who sees it, they can laugh, they can cry, or they can sympathize, but building it so that they have some relationship with the characters in the story. Once you find that, you should be able to frame how you're presenting it so that anyone who's reading it, they are not focused on, look, this is a really dark drama, because they are looking for the moments that resonate for them. Now, that does not always work with every audience. And that's where it comes down to just sort of, um, you know, maybe even opening up the marketplace to look internationally. There could be someone in Canada that relates to the story being told from a Brazilian filmmaker that you can reach out to, email, connect on social media, just find. Because what I don't know, and you can tell me this, is it a requirement or an option that government funding is a part of your process?
It's an option, but it's becoming more and more of an option because with the streaming services entering the Brazilian market, we have more options for financing. But for for a bunch of years, we had only two options. Like we either go to this huge conglomerate, global, or we go to to get government funding that is widely available if you apply yourself to it. But it's they like understandably they have a slant towards stories that are socially oriented, right? That are like socially relevant. They want stories that are going to advance whatever agenda or things they want in society. So it's hard for us to, for example, to make like a Felipe over there. He had an idea for a superhero movie about an elderly man who decides to become a superhero, right? And it's like a fun fantasy adventure, but we had to frame it as maybe kind of this story about elderly people coming to terms with their mortality and whatnot, and that gives us some focus into certain aspects of the film, but it prevents us from getting from maybe sometimes from building some really more popcorn movies rather, or event films, or things that are more action oriented. So it's a compromise. It's an interesting system.
Yeah. So I'll tell you that when I learned of Felipe's story, uh, it really resonated for me, and so you know that's just something that you can pick up on the internet, right? So getting people familiar with the story you want to tell, I think, is part of the process, because just on the surface of it, I would be, you know, time willing, I would reach out to Felipe and say, "Tell me more about this story," because that goes back to, once you know what it is you want to say, don't limit yourself to only the resources that you know, put it out for everyone to be aware of it, and so that the right, you can go where you're treated the best, right? So, uh, you know, I don't see issue with either framing of that story, but I would take issue with compromising the integrity of the intent behind it.
Yeah, something that we realize, Octavio and I, he's my follow people.
We didn't compromise too much on the story, but we have to sell it as this thing about aging. It is about aging, but it's not only about it. It's a family story, and but we know that people who was evaluating was interested on this kind of framing for selling. So it's more of sales pitch, right? You have to change, but if you do a single popcorn movie, it's an action, you will hardly have this funding, right?
Yeah, it's harder. Yeah, it can be harder to get these things done. And actually, just so I can get the movie, the film was made, the Felipe directed. It's called Captain Wits, and it's going to be playing here in the U.S. Where Felipe? In San Francisco, Chicago,
And Seattle.
and Seattle. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, if anyone listening wants to check it out, you can find more info at Felipe's webpage and Instagram and whatnot. But yeah, that's like really this talk is really an amazing lesson because it's so refreshing to see perspectives from someone who's working on such high level projects and has been like for years getting things done and getting a perspective from the US market too, because we can get maybe sometimes really used to the way things are done over there, and part of what we're trying to do when we came here and to talk to you guys is maybe get a fresh perspective and get some ideas into how can we market these ideas and these films as effectively as you guys do, because you guys are really effective.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna we're closing in on 15 minutes here, and I'm gonna let you go. But one last question is, you're saying like that you've done some research into whatever what your audience, like you said, do some research into what your audience wants. Like,
Yes.
how do you do your research? How did you find like the audience for The Woman King, for example?
Just within internally at GV, we will do just internet research, and then we have someone who works on our social media so they can sort of track who's engaging in that arena. And then it's a matter of collaborating with the distributor, with the studio, because they have more research that can complement ours. But you know, when you determine that you want to do a project, and you say it's a comedy or it's an action, uh, get online and say, hey, action films, comedy films, big actors, small actors, uh, big budget, small budget. Every element of your film that you can touch on and search. Let's say you have an actor in mind. What has that actor done? What are they interested in? Have you seen any interviews with them where they say, I'm really passionate about your subject? Just sort of any element of your content that you can think of that you can search, I would use all of that as research. How did it do in the Brazilian market? How did it do in the American market? Did it go into China? Did Italy respond? I would look at all of those marketplaces, and you can just search it. Sometimes you can find it on Wikipedia. That's a really good resource. You can go to IMDb. That's also a really good research. And drill down and make your notes and keep your comments and thoughts as a research document, so that when you go in to present your film and you've created a narrative, you have all the answers to all the questions that someone might ask. And so, it really is a matter of saying, hey, I want to make a action film. What kind of action film do I want to make? I want to make a film like The Woman King. Okay, what kind of films historically have been done in this way, and how have they resonated? So, just sort of looking at those comparative analysis that you can do with a simple internet search. I highly recommend it. That way, when you're presenting it, you have all of these sort of replies to any questions that might come up in the room.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's amazing.
One last question.
Oh, Octavio has one last question over here. Sorry.
Rob, just one last question. Sorry, technical issues. So you were talking about finding the heart of your project to sell for to get the funds. I just would like to know more. As an example, what was the heart of Woman King when you guys were selling for the Sony and everyone? What was the your vision, you guys, the vision that you sold to them for them to see the uniqueness of the movie?
Thank you. So I would offer that the essence of The Woman King was it was easy to recognize for anyone that would hear the story once you establish the dynamic of the real life women that it's based upon. And so looking through any story that you want to tell and looking at it through a humanizing perspective. So you have these heroes, but who are they, right? And what were their daily lives like, and what experiences did they have to get them there? So now you have the dynamic of someone who is a warrior, but then has an internal emotional battle that they're dealing with. And so the dynamics of that really brought the characters to life. And I think that is really key in establishing your story, because what it has is it has an entertaining element with, let's just say, The Woman King was a comedy, right? And but and of course, if you're going to have comedy, you got to be funny. So you have the funny moments, but then you find, most comedians will tell you they have dark stories. That's why they're so funny, right? So if you're telling a story, find those moments, and then you're complementing the entertainment with the message. And so it really was a matter of saying, hey, the action is there organically, but now we're really engaging the emotional part of the story with giving you a little bit more information about these characters. And one thing I often offer with filmmakers and writers in particular is going into the story, learn as much as you can about the characters. Know what their favorite color was. Know if they had a best friend. Know if they liked their parents, or they had good parents or bad parents, one parent or two parent, or what their early, just even if it's just backstory in your head, it helps you to drive the narrative of the characters, and then you don't have to disrupt the entertainment value. So, if it's a sci-fi, you can keep that sci-fi element. One story that I often go back to is the Batman origin story that Christopher Nolan did. It completely changed the franchise because we got to learn a little bit more about Batman. And so when you can do that and yet maintain the entertainment value, I often really encourage filmmakers to have those two parallel projections. That way, whoever's on the side of the table, if they don't resonate with the entertainment element and they don't resonate with the human element, you might want to keep going and talk to more people.
Thank you so much for the answer. Man, if we could, we would be here asking you questions all day, but I know we gotta let you go. I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. This has been like really informative, really good, really really a lesson in producing and filmmaking. And I hope you like. I'm looking forward to what you got coming for us in Brazil in the future, because listen, The Woman is such an amazing project, and from your resume, I think we can expect so many great things. Thanks again, man, for taking the time to talking to us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Congratulations on all that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to continuing.
All right. I hope we can connect soon, and we'll keep talking. We'll keep in touch.
Absolutely.